Moonlight sliced through the darkness, painting intricate shadows on the snow. Hope clutched her infant close, shielding the baby from the biting wind. Her strength was ebbing. Somewhere beyond the trees, a wolf howled. "Not now," she whispered, feeling the cold seep beneath her clothes. The woman struggled to her feet, then froze. A few yards away, nestled among the snow-dusted pines, stood a she-wolf. Her light fur seemed silver in the moonlight. The predator's right ear was half torn, giving her the appearance of a seasoned fighter. Hope instinctively covered her baby, but the wolf. Before we begin, tell us what city you're from. Subscribe, like, and watch until the end. Here we go. Ethan, have you lost your mind? Moving to Pine Ridge? There's no civilization there. Hope stared at her husband as if he'd suggested relocating to Mars. Ethan sighed, sitting down beside his wife. "Honey, listen, Holly's getting worse. The doctors explicitly said if we don't get her out of the city, her asthma will only progress." He took her hand, looking into her eyes. "It's only 3 hours from Portland. The air is pristine, nothing but pine forests around. The house is decent, with a wood stove, but it has electricity, too. And the best part, I've made arrangements with my company. I'll be taking routes through that area. I'll be able to come home more often." Hope looked at 5-year-old Holly, sleeping in her crib. Even now, in her sleep, her wheezing, heavy breath was audible from across the room. 3-year-old Daisy, playing with a doll on the rug, suddenly looked up. "Will there be a forest? A real one? With squirrels?" Ethan smiled. "With squirrels, bunnies, and even elk." "Then let's go," the little girl declared unequivocally. Hope couldn't help but smile. They say out of the mouths of babes. "What about Daisy's preschool and the hospital? I'm 8 months along, after all." She instinctively placed a hand on her visibly rounded belly. "There's a good birthing center in the next town over, only a 40-minute drive. And as for daycare—" He hesitated slightly. "Honestly, there's only a school there, and it's a small one-room schoolhouse. But wouldn't it be nice if the kids could stay home with you for a bit longer?" Hope considered it. Maybe he was right. After her 3rd child, she'd planned to take a break from her accounting job anyway. And later, once the youngest was a little older, she could think about freelancing. "All right," she finally said, "let's try it. But if something goes wrong, we'll move back to the city," Ethan finished for her. "I promise." The village of Pine Ridge struck Hope with its profound quiet. After the city noise, it felt surreal. To hear the rustling of leaves, the birds singing, and nothing else. No car horns, no music from neighbors' windows, no rumble of planes. The house, which Ethan had bought at a surprisingly low price, turned out to be a sturdy log cabin with a spacious porch and an apple orchard. Old, yes, but well built, with high ceilings and large windows overlooking the forest. "Well, hello, new neighbors," a voice called out as they unloaded their belongings from the truck. An elderly woman approached the house, a woven basket in her hands. Her gray hair was styled in a simple but neat bun, her face etched with wrinkles, but her eyes were lively, with a playful glint. "I'm Margaret," she introduced herself. "I live across the road. I brought you a blueberry pie to sweeten your new home." "Thank you so much." Hope accepted the treat. "I'm Hope. This is my husband, Ethan, and our girls are Holly and Daisy." Margaret crouched down to be at eye level with the children. "Lovely girls. And you, I see, are expecting another soon?" "Yes, in about a month," Hope nodded. "It'll be a boy." the neighbor declared confidently, looking her up and down. Your belly's high and pointed. We certainly hope so, Ethan smiled. We've already picked a name, Matthew. A good, strong name, Margaret approved. Just be careful with the woods, you hear? What do you mean? Hope asked, a little wary. Just what I said. The forest here is special. Locals know how to behave, but newcomers often make mistakes. Don't go alone past the old pine, the one with the split trunk at the forest entrance, especially not now being pregnant. The forest doesn't like it. Ethan exchanged a look with Hope, barely suppressing a smile. Thanks for the advice. We'll keep it in mind, he replied diplomatically. When the neighbor left, Hope quietly laughed. Looks like we've got a local storyteller. A village without its legends isn't a village, Ethan shrugged. Come on, there are still tons of boxes to unpack. By a strange coincidence, after moving to Pine Ridge, Hope began to have unusual dreams. In them, she wandered through the forest, not lost, but as if guided by someone, and she always woke up with the feeling that she had seen something important, but couldn't quite remember what. Holly genuinely improved almost immediately. Her wheeze disappeared, her skin regained a healthy glow, and the asthma attacks that had plagued her weekly in the city hadn't appeared for over a month. Daisy plunged headfirst into village life, running around with the local kids, picking berries, bringing home beetles and caterpillars for her collection. Hope gradually got used to it, too. Trips to the well for water, stoking the stove, garden chores. It all took time, but brought a strange satisfaction. In the evenings, when the girls were asleep, she would sit on the porch, listening to the silence. The forest loomed 100 yards from the house, and sometimes it seemed to her that it was watching her, studying her. Ethan would visit every week or 10 days, bringing city treats and news. His huge truck, parked outside the house, always delighted the village children. "How are you?" he'd ask each time, kissing the top of her head. "Don't you miss the city?" And each time she'd reply, "Surprisingly, no. It's peaceful here." This Sunday, Ethan was supposed to return from another trip, but he called from the road. "Honey, I'm sorry, I'm stuck on the highway. There was an accident ahead of us, blocked all lanes. I won't be home before tomorrow evening." "It's all right, we'll manage," Hope reassured him. "Be careful on the road." That evening, putting the girls to bed, she noticed Holly breathing heavier than usual. "Does your throat hurt?" she asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. "A little," the girl admitted. "And it's hard to breathe." Hope grew anxious. Was the asthma returning? She gave her daughter cough syrup and lay next to her to monitor her condition. In the middle of the night, Holly woke up with a fit of suffocating coughs. Her face was red, her breathing wheezy, and the girl clutched her mother's arm in panic. "Mommy, can't breathe," she rasped. Hope rushed to the medicine cabinet but was horrified to find that the inhaler, which they hadn't used in ages, was empty. "Margaret?" was her first thought, pulling on her jacket on the fly. The neighbor didn't open the door right away. Sleepy-eyed in her nightgown and headscarf, she squinted nearsightedly at her nocturnal visitor. "Good heavens, Hope, what's wrong?" "Holly's having an asthma attack. I need an inhaler, and ours is empty," Hope blurted out. "Do you have anything similar?" Margaret shook her head. "Where would I get that, dear? I have heart medicine, blood pressure cuffs, but nothing for asthma." "Is there a pharmacy in the village?" "The nearest one is in Lakeside, about 15 miles away." The neighbor frowned worriedly. "But you won't get there at night. The bus only runs in the morning." What about an ambulance? Our phones don't work very well, you know, and they usually take about 2 hours to get here if they even turn up. Hope knew that every minute counted. She thought of a shuttle that supposedly ran on the highway even at night, but she still had to get to the highway. You could go directly across the lake, Margaret said, as if reading her mind. It's about 15 minutes by boat, then another 15 through the woods. The pharmacist in Lakeside can be roused at night if it's serious. Can you sit with the girls? Hope asked firmly. I'll be quick. In your condition, the neighbor exclaimed, throwing up her hands. You're about to deliver. Shall I wake Patrick? He's a park ranger. He's used to being out at night. By the time you wake him, by the time you explain. Hope shook her head. I'll manage. I'll take a boat from the dock. Margaret, please, just stay with the girls. Something in Hope's gaze made her neighbor fall silent and just nod. Go. I'll watch them. Only be careful out there in the woods, and don't forget what I said about the split pine. Don't go past it alone. The lake breathed fog. The boat, which Hope struggled to push into the water, rocked on the small waves. The sky was clouding over, hiding the stars. Flashlight, oars, phone, she muttered, checking her pockets. Seems like everything. Taking the oars, Hope steered the boat toward the opposite shore. Each stroke was an effort, not only because of her pregnancy, but also because of the strengthening wind, which seemed to try to push her back. Her thoughts kept returning to Holly. How was she doing now? Was she feeling better? Would she hold on until Hope returned? Finally, the boat bumped its nose onto the sandy shore. Hope pulled it halfway out of the water, tethered it to the nearest tree, and, switching on her flashlight, headed into the forest. She had to walk along a narrow path between the pines. She had never taken this route before, but the locals said the trail was straight. You couldn't get lost. The main thing is to keep heading north, she repeated to herself, checking the compass on her phone. The wind intensified, bending the treetops. Somewhere far off, lightning flashed, and a few seconds later, thunder rumbled. Just what I needed, a thunderstorm, Hope muttered, quickening her pace. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through her lower abdomen. She gasped, leaning against a pine trunk. A new contraction made her double over. No, 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 not now, she whispered. It's still 2 weeks away. But nature didn't ask her opinion. The contractions grew more frequent, more intense. Hope realized she definitely wouldn't make it to Lakeside. She either had to go back, or the new contraction was so strong that she lost her footing and dropped to her knees. Now even returning seemed impossible. Her flashlight fell from her hands, rolled across the ground, and went out. In the darkness, a strange sound was heard, neither wind nor rain. Something was approaching. The first drops fell from the sky, sparse at first, then more frequent. A minute later, a real downpour began. Hope struggled to crawl to a large pine, leaned against its trunk, and spread her jacket on the wet ground. "Help!" she whispered into the darkness, not knowing who she was addressing. "Please!" It was then that she saw the she-wolf, a silhouette that appeared between the trees like a ghost. In the light of another lightning flash, the predator's eyes gleamed. Hope instinctively recoiled, covering her belly with her hands. The wolf approached, sniffed her, and, to the woman's astonishment, lay down beside her, pressing its warm flank against her. The animal was large, with silvery gray fur and a strange scar that made its right ear appear half torn. She should have been afraid, panicked, fought back. But Hope suddenly felt a strange calm, as if This was how it was supposed to be, as if the forest had sent its guardian to her. The contractions continued, becoming increasingly unbearable. The wolf didn't move, only occasionally turning its head, as if checking on the strange protégé's condition. When it was time to push, Hope wasn't thinking about anything but the baby. The rain had turned to sleet, then into a full-blown snowstorm. But strangely, she didn't feel the cold. The wolf, having moved behind her, shielded her from the wind. The baby came into the world to the accompaniment of thunder. A girl, not a boy, small, wet, but surprisingly alive. She cried immediately, fiercely and demandingly, as if protesting the unsuitable conditions of her birth. Hope, exhausted and depleted, pressed her daughter to her chest, trying to warm her. Only now did she notice that the wolf had already bitten through the umbilical cord, just like in the stories of Mowgli or Romulus and Remus. The thought made her laugh and feel afraid at the same time. "What's happening?" she whispered, looking into the beast's amber eyes. "Who are you?" The she-wolf stared at her without fear, almost human-like. Then she lay down again, creating a protective barrier between Hope and her infant and the rest of the world. The last thing Hope remembered before fading into unconsciousness was the warmth of the wolf's body and her daughter's quiet, even breathing against her chest. "Hope, Hope, my God, wake up!" The voice reached her as if through cotton. She struggled to open her eyes and saw her husband's frightened face. "Ethan?" she whispered incredulously. "How did you—" "Later, everything later!" He carefully lifted her into his arms, along with the baby wrapped in her jacket. "Hold on, the ambulance is here." Headlights cut through the trees. People in white quickly approached along the path carrying a stretcher. "It's a girl," Hope murmured, feeling consciousness slipping away again. "Not Matthew." "Doesn't matter." Ethan exhaled, hugging them tight. "The main thing is you're both alive." In the ambulance, the doctor examined the newborn, shaking her head. "Astonishing. Judging by her condition, the baby was born several hours ago. In such conditions without medical help, it's a true miracle that both mother and child are all right." "There was a she-wolf," Hope mumbled, "with a torn ear. She helped me." The doctor and Ethan exchanged glances. "She's in shock and hypothermia, possibly hallucinating," the doctor said quietly. "We haven't seen wolves in these parts for 20 years. "But I saw her. She bit through the umbilical cord and kept us warm," Hope insisted, feeling despair grow inside her. Why wouldn't they believe her? "Hush, darling, hush," Ethan soothed, stroking her head. "It's all right. You did wonderfully. Our daughter is healthy. That's what matters." "What shall we name her?" Hope asked, understanding that arguing was pointless. Ethan pondered. "She was born in a snowstorm under the moon. How about Lunar? It's unusual but beautiful. What do you think?" "Lunar," Hope repeated. The name resonated with something profound, something right. Yes, let it be Lunar. Upon returning home, Ethan shared how, troubled by a premonition, he had dropped everything and rushed back. How he learned from Margaret where she'd gone. How he called an ambulance and then ran into the forest to look for his wife along the trail. "And Holly," Hope suddenly remembered, "is she better?" "You won't believe it. When I got back, she was sleeping like a baby." Ethan shook his head. "Margaret gave her some kind of herbal concoction, said it was an old remedy, and it really helped." Hope nodded, thinking her own thoughts. Neither then nor later did she tell her husband what truly happened in the forest. About her certainty, that the wolf was real, about the strange dreams that continued to come to her after Lunar's birth. In them, she saw the forest through the eyes of a wolf, running between the trees. Lunar grew into an unusual child, calm, observant, surprisingly sensitive to nature. By 18 months, she could already distinguish dozens of plants, birds, and insects, and she approached animals without fear. "She's just like you," Ethan would say, watching as the little girl could sit for hours under a tree, examining ants or conversing with birds in her own, uniquely understood language. Hope would smile, but say nothing. She knew it wasn't about her. And one day, almost exactly 2 years after that night in the forest, her suspicion was confirmed. The day was unseasonably warm for early autumn. Hope took the children into the forest to gather the last of the cranberries. Holly and Daisy ran ahead, while she walked more slowly with Lunar, the little one frequently stopping to inspect a bug or an unusual leaf. "Look, Mom!" Holly suddenly shouted from somewhere beyond the trees. "There's a huge ant hill." "Come over here, but don't touch it," Hope called back, stepping over a fallen tree. Distracted for literally a minute, she suddenly realized Lunar wasn't beside her. Her heart squeezed with anxiety. "Lunar!" she called out, looking around. "Lunar, where are you?" Silence. Only the wind rustled in the treetops. "Holly, Daisy, have you seen Lunar?" she shouted towards the ant-hill. "No, Mom," Holly replied. "She was with you." Hope walked back along the path, peering between the trees. "Lunar, answer me, little one!" Somewhere off the trail, a bright spot flashed. Her daughter's red jacket. Hope rushed towards it, pushing aside thorny bushes. Lunar was sitting in a clearing, her back to her mother, chatting animatedly, mixing real words with childish babbling. Hope froze, disbelieving her eyes. Before the girl, head resting on its paws, lay the same she-wolf with the torn ear. Unchanged over the years, only a new wisdom seemed to fill her eyes. "Lunar," Hope called softly, afraid to disrupt the moment. The girl turned and clapped her hands joyfully. "Mommy, look, a doggy!" The wolf raised her head, meeting Hope's gaze. In that look was recognition, a greeting, and something else, an almost human plea. Only now did the woman notice something stirring beneath the wolf's paws. "Mommy, look!" Lunar babbled excitedly, pointing at the wolf. "The doggy has a baby." Hope cautiously approached and spotted a tiny wolf cub huddled against its mother. But something was wrong. The cub's back leg was strangely twisted, and a rusty piece of barbed wire was wrapped around its body and tail. "Oh, my God!" Hope exhaled, kneeling beside her daughter. "He's hurt." The she-wolf whined softly, as if understanding human speech, and gently nudged her cub towards the woman. "He's tangled," Hope whispered, examining the wire, "and he can't get free by himself." She slowly extended her hand, expecting a growl or bared teeth, but the wolf only watched intently. Her gaze seemed to say, "I trust you." "You helped me, now I'll help you," Hope said quietly, carefully lifting the cub. The tiny creature trembled in her hands. A warm bundle with grayish-brown fur and black bead-like eyes. Miraculously, the wire hadn't cut its skin, but it had tightly constricted its leg and part of its body, preventing normal movement. Hope carefully untangled the wire, trying not to hurt the cub. Lunar, sitting nearby, watched the process with fascination, occasionally reaching out to stroke the puppy. "Wait, sweetie," her mother stopped her. "First, we have to free him." Finally, the last coil of wire was removed. Hope examined the cub carefully. No wounds, Only the fur was matted where the wire had pressed particularly hard. "You're a lucky little one," she smiled, gently placing the cub back on the ground. The cub, feeling free, took a few wobbly steps towards its mother and huddled against her side. The she-wolf thoroughly sniffed it, as if checking if everything was all right, and then turned to Hope. Their gazes met, and the woman felt an indescribable sense of connection, as if for a moment they became parts of a single whole, two mothers protecting their children in a dangerous world. The she-wolf stood, nudged her cub gently with her nose, and took a few steps towards the thicket, but before leaving she paused and looked back at Hope and Lunar. In that gaze was a promise. "Until we meet again," Hope said softly, picking up her daughter, "protect your little one." The wolf and cub disappeared among the trees like ghosts. Lunar waved her small hand after them. "Bye-bye, doggy," she babbled. Only now did Hope notice how loudly her heart was beating. What had happened seemed unreal, like a waking dream. But the warm weight of Lunar in her arms reminded her it had all truly happened. "Mom, Mom, where are you?" The worried voices of her older daughters reached her. "We're here," Hope called back, heading toward the path. "Coming to you!" That evening, after putting the children to bed, Hope sat on the porch, watching the dark silhouettes of the trees. Stars dusted the sky, bright and clear, as they only are away from city lights. "Can't sleep?" Ethan came out of the house, slinging a jacket over his shoulders, and sat beside her. "Just thinking," she replied, leaning against his shoulder. "About what?" Hope paused, choosing her words carefully. "You know, I keep thinking about that night in the forest, when Lunar was born." Ethan tensed. "Hope, we talked about this. You were imagining things." "What if I wasn't?" she asked softly. "What if the she-wolf really was there? What if the forest is alive, truly alive and conscious?" Her husband sighed. "You need to listen to Margaret and her tall tales less." "It's not about tall tales." Hope shook her head. "It's just that ever since we moved here I've felt a connection to the forest, to this place, as if we're not here by chance." Ethan hugged her tighter. "Maybe you've just finally found your home? A place where you feel good?" "Maybe," she agreed, but there was still a hint of doubt in her voice. They sat in silence, listening to the night sounds, crickets chirping, an owl hooting somewhere in the distance, the rustling of leaves. "Do you think," Hope finally asked, "wolves can truly feel gratitude?" "Where did that come from?" Ethan looked surprised. She shrugged. "Just curious. I always thought of them as just predators, but now I wonder, what if they're more complex than we're used to thinking?" "All animals are more complex than they seem," her husband mused, "especially those that live in families. They have their own morals, their own laws. Who knows? Maybe gratitude isn't foreign to them either." Hope smiled, looking up at the stars. "I like to think so." The following months passed peacefully. Lunar grew, becoming more intelligent and independent. Her connection with nature only strengthened. She could observe birds or insects for hours, gathered bouquets of wildflowers, and constantly begged to go into the forest. "I want to see the doggy," she would repeat when Hope gathered the family for a walk. "What doggy, sweetie?" Ethan would ask. "The big furry one," Lunar would explain, spreading her arms to show its size. Hope would just smile enigmatically. She hadn't told her husband about the second encounter with the she-wolf. For some reason, it felt like it should remain her and Lunar's secret. And then something they had long awaited happened. Hope became pregnant again. The ultrasound showed that this time it would be a boy. Ethan beamed with happiness. "Just imagine, we're finally going to have Matthew," he would say, gently stroking his wife's still almost flat belly. The pregnancy was easy, without complications, but it coincided with troubling events in the village. Poachers appeared in the surrounding forests. Locals complained to the county administration, but the authorities did nothing. "They're setting traps, snares," Patrick, the local park ranger, told them during a tea visit. "They've scared away all the game, and recently they were seen chasing wolves in their jeeps." "But there haven't been wolves here for ages," Ethan objected. The old man shrewdly squinted. "That's what they say. But the forest is vast. You don't know all its secrets." Hope remained silent, clutching her cup tightly. She thought of the she-wolf with the torn ear and her cub. What if the poachers found them? "Something needs to be done," she said decisively after Patrick left. "What can we do?" Ethan shrugged. "We'll file reports, of course, but you know how that goes." Hope pondered. Then she stood up with determination. "We need to talk to everyone, all the residents of the village, organize patrols, watch the forest." "In your condition," her husband frowned. "I'll only organize," she reassured him. "I won't go on patrols, I promise." The next day, Hope called an impromptu meeting at the general store, the only place in the village where everyone gathered. To her surprise, people responded eagerly. Men, in particular, actively supported the idea. Many of them were hunters and fishermen, and the poachers bothered them no less than they harmed nature. "We'll take turns on watch," decided old Mike, a grizzled hunter, "in pairs with walkie-talkies. If we see strangers, we'll immediately call the sheriff and Patrick." "And I'll take pictures," offered a young man who had recently moved from the city. "I have a good camera with a zoom lens. We'll get their faces and license plates." Ethan, initially skeptical of his wife's plan, now enthusiastically joined in the planning. "I can take night shifts when I'm home, and I'll create a chat group on our phone so everyone can stay in touch." That evening, as Hope read the girls a bedtime story, Lunar suddenly said, "Mommy, the doggie says, 'Thank you.'" "What doggie, sweetie?" Hope asked again, though she already knew the answer. "The big furry one, with the baby," the girl answered seriously, looking past her mother as if she saw something others couldn't. Hope felt a chill run down her spine. "When did she tell you that?" "Just now," Lunar simply replied and yawned. "She knows you're helping." That night, Hope dreamed of the forest again. But now she wasn't just wandering between the trees. She was a she-wolf, running on 4 paws, feeling the damp earth beneath her pads, inhaling thousands of scents, hearing the slightest rustle from a great distance. Next to her ran a grown cub, almost the size of its mother, and somewhere ahead, danger awaited. People with weapons, with bright flashlights and the roar of machines. Waking up in a cold sweat, Hope knew what she had to do. "You're out of your mind!" Ethan wasn't shouting, but his voice trembled with barely suppressed anger. 8 months pregnant, going into the forest at night, alone? "I won't be alone," Hope answered softly. "Patrick will come with me, and a few other people." "But why do you even have to go? Let the men deal with the poachers themselves." Hope took a deep breath. She couldn't explain to her husband that she knew, she felt exactly where the poachers would be tonight. She couldn't tell him about her dream, about the strange connection with the she-wolf, about what Lunar saw and heard. "I just want to help," she said. "I'll sit in Patrick's truck at the edge of the forest, show them where to set up an ambush. Then I'll come straight home." Ethan looked at her with a long, scrutinizing gaze. "What's happening, Hope? Ever since Lunar was born, you've changed. This obsession with the forest, the wolves. Nothing's happening." She took his hands. "I just feel a responsibility for this place. It's become our home, and I want our children to grow up in a world where people don't kill animals for sport." In the end, he gave in, but made her promise she wouldn't leave the car and would be home before midnight. The evening forest greeted them with silence. Patrick slowly drove his old pickup truck along the forest road, occasionally glancing at Hope. "Where to next, boss?" She didn't know herself where this knowledge came from, but she confidently pointed the way. "Further to the fork, then left, to the old ranger station." The ranger just shook his head, but didn't argue. Behind them, in 2 more vehicles, were 6 other men from the village, former hunters, fishermen, just strong, sturdy country folk. The old ranger station was a dilapidated cabin in a small clearing. A ranger once lived there, but after his death, no new position was created, and the cabin gradually fell into disrepair. "Here," Hope said when they stopped 100 yards from the clearing. "They'll arrive in about an hour. 3 vehicles, 5 or 6 men with rifles." "How do you know?" Patrick squinted. She looked away. "I overheard a conversation at the store. Some city folks came through boasting they were tracking a wolf pack." The ranger grunted. It was clear he didn't believe her, but he didn't pursue the topic. "All right. You, as promised, stay in the car. We'll position the men around the clearing." He pulled a walkie-talkie from the glove compartment. "If anything goes wrong, signal immediately." Hope nodded. When the men disappeared into the forest, she turned off the car lights and leaned back in her seat, closing her eyes. The baby in her belly was actively kicking, as if sensing her anxiety. "Quiet, little one," she whispered, stroking her belly. "Everything will be all right." Time passed slowly. At some point, Hope dozed off and again saw the forest through the eyes of a she-wolf. The pack, the female with a grown cub and 3 other wolves, approached the clearing from the opposite side. They had caught the scent of humans, but didn't perceive any danger from them. The scent was familiar, safe. But another scent, distant yet approaching, made the hair on her hackles rise. Machine oil, gunpowder, alcohol. Enemies. Hope suddenly awoke to the sound of approaching engines. 3 SUVs with bright headlights drove into the clearing and stopped in a semicircle in front of the abandoned ranger station. Men emerged from the vehicles, 5 of them, talking and laughing loudly. Each carried a rifle. Some had knives hanging from their belts. "The wolves are close," one said, sniffing the air. "I can smell them, a mile at most." "We'll herd them to the river," another responded, raising his rifle. "They'll have nowhere to go there." Hope grabbed the walkie-talkie. "Patrick, they're here. 5 of them, all armed." "Copy that," the ranger responded curtly. "Stay quiet." Meanwhile, the poachers were retrieving equipment from their trunks, powerful flashlights, nets, some metallic devices resembling traps. "Going for live bait?" the youngest asked. "Of course," the bearded man, apparently the leader, smirked. "Bullet-riddled hides fetch less. We want them intact." Patrick and the others chose the perfect moment to appear, just as the poachers had laid out their gear and were about to head deeper into the forest. Several powerful flashlights simultaneously flared around the clearing. "Freeze!" The ranger's authoritative voice boomed. "You are on protected land. Poaching, illegal possession of firearms. Drop your weapons." Silence hung heavy. Then one of the poachers nervously laughed. "What's your deal, old man? What protected land? This is just regular forest. We're just out hunting." "With traps and nets?" Patrick slowly walked into the clearing, holding a double-barreled shotgun. Behind him, the other men from the village appeared, armed with whatever they had. Rifles, pitchforks. One even held a chainsaw, though it was switched off. "Since when do locals protect wolves?" The bearded man squinted. "They slaughter your livestock." "There are no wolves here," Patrick calmly replied. "And if there were, that's our concern, not yours. So pack up your junk and get out of here." What happened next unfolded so quickly that Hope barely registered it. The bearded man suddenly raised his rifle and fired into the air. "Why don't you just buzz off, yokels? There are more of us, and we're better armed." "Actually, no," a calm voice rang out, and the sheriff stepped into the clearing with 3 deputies. "Weapons on the ground, hands behind your heads. You're under arrest." The stunned poachers didn't have time to react before they were in handcuffs. As the deputies led them away, Patrick approached Hope's car. "Thanks, boss. Your plan worked." "You called the sheriff?" she wondered. "Of course," the ranger chuckled. "Do you think I've completely lost my mind, dealing with armed poachers without official support?" Hope smiled gratefully. "You did exactly the right thing." As they headed back towards the village, she suddenly said, "Stop, please." "What is it?" Patrick became alarmed. "Nothing serious. It's just, I think I heard something." The car stopped. Hope lowered the window and peered into the darkness of the forest. At first, nothing was visible. Then a silvery silhouette flickered between the trees. The she-wolf stood at the boundary of light and shadow, looking directly at Hope. Beside her, 4 other figures stood still, the grown cub, now almost an adult, and 3 other wolves. "Do you see them?" Hope whispered. Patrick followed her gaze and whistled. "Well, They actually came back." The she-wolf looked at them for a few seconds, then turned and disappeared into the forest. The other wolves followed her. "You know," the ranger said thoughtfully as they started driving again, "they say these lands have an ancient soul. I don't really believe in that sort of thing, but sometimes strange things happen, as if the forest itself decides who gets to live here and who doesn't." Hope nodded, thinking about her special connection with the she-wolf. "I know what you mean." Matthew was born in early April, when the forest was already covered in delicate green and migratory birds had returned. His birth was easy, without complications, at the birthing center in the neighboring town, as planned. "He's the spitting image of his dad," the midwife smiled, showing them the newborn's wrinkled face. Ethan couldn't hide his pride. "Finally, I have a son. The girls are wonderful, of course, but a son." Hope looked at the tiny creature in her arms and thought of that night in the forest when Lunar was born. Everything was so different now. A sterile delivery room instead of rain and snow, experienced doctors instead of... But she stopped herself. Some things simply had to be accepted without trying to explain them. When they returned home, Lunar was the first to run up to the baby. "I want to see my brother." Hope knelt, showing her daughter the newborn. "Here he is. Your brother Matthew?" The girl looked seriously at the red face in the swaddling clothes, then smiled. "He's good. The doggie will like him." "What doggie?" Ethan asked, approaching. It's just a game we play, Hope quickly explained. Lunar pretends we have a dog. Her husband smiled and ruffled her hair. Maybe when Matthew's older, we'll get a real one? No need, Lunar answered seriously. We already have one, in the forest. Years passed. The children grew, transforming the village along with them. Pine Ridge gradually changed from a dying hamlet into a small but thriving community. A new store opened, a medical clinic, even an elementary school. Holly grew into a healthy young woman, completely free of asthma. Daisy became her mother's dedicated assistant, serious and responsible. And Lunar, she remained special. She maintained her amazing connection with nature, spending hours in the forest, conversing with birds and animals. I wonder what she'll become, Ethan would say, watching 10-year-old Lunar return from the forest with an armload of herbs and flowers. A biologist? A vet? She'll become a guardian of the forest, Hope would reply, and there was no doubt in her voice. The wolf pack remained in these forests. Patrick said there were about a dozen of them now. The she-wolf with the torn ear, her children and grandchildren. But strangely, they never bothered the livestock in the village, never attacked people. They kept to themselves, but every now and then they were seen on the outskirts of the forest, as if patrolling their territory. And once a year, on the night Lunar was born, Hope would go out onto the porch, and almost always she would see them, the she-wolf and her pack, at the edge of the forest, silent guardians, recognizing her as a fellow guardian, and she felt a strange, inexplicable kinship. A few weeks before her 11th birthday, Lunar came to her mother with an unusual request. "Mom, tell me about the night I was born. Tell me the truth." Hope looked intently at her daughter. Lunar had grown into a slender, almost watercolor-like girl with clear gray eyes and light, almost silvery hair. Many in the village said she resembled neither her mother nor her father, as if nature had created her in its own image. "Why are you asking now?" Hope asked softly. Lunar shrugged. "She said it was time." "Who said?" "The she-wolf," the girl simply replied, as if it were the most ordinary thing. "I see her in my dreams. She says it's time for you to tell me." Hope took a deep breath. She knew this day would come, eventually. She just hadn't expected it so soon. "All right," she said, sitting on the edge of the bed and patting the space next to her. "Sit with me. It's a long story." And Hope told it all, without holding anything back. About Holly's asthma attack, about the nighttime journey across the lake, about how the contraction started in the middle of the forest, about the snow and cold, about the fear and despair, and about the she-wolf who came out of the darkness to help. "She warmed me with her body," Hope said quietly. "When you were born, she bit through the umbilical cord, just as she would with her own pups. And then she lay beside us, protecting us all night until help arrived." Lunar listened, eyes wide, without interrupting. "Dad and the doctors didn't believe me," Hope continued. "They said it was delirium, hallucinations from hypothermia. But I knew she was real. And then, when you were almost 2 years old, we met her again. And I helped untangle her cub," Lunar finished softly. "I remember it." Hope looked at her daughter in astonishment. "You can't remember. You were only 2 years old." "But I remember," Lunar said stubbornly. "I remember other things, too. I remember running through the forest on 4 paws, hunting, leading my pups out of the den in spring." Hope shuddered. "What are you saying?" "I often have dreams like that," Lunar explained. "Mom, I think I think I'm connected to her somehow, to the she-wolf. Maybe a part of her soul lives in me, or a part of mine in her. Hope felt a chill run down her spine. All these years she had thought she was the only one who felt a strange connection to the forest and its guardian. But now she realized Lunar felt it far more intensely. "I don't know what it means," she said honestly, "but I think the connection truly exists. You were born in an unusual way, in an unusual place. Maybe the forest marked you in some way." Lunar nodded, as if this explanation perfectly satisfied her. "The she-wolf will die soon," she suddenly said. "What?" Hope felt her heart clench. "How do you know?" "She's old," Lunar simply replied. "Many years have passed. Her time is coming to an end. But before that, she wants to meet you again." "Me? When?" "On the full moon," Lunar answered. "In 3 days. She'll be waiting in that same clearing where I was born." Ethan never learned the truth about that night. Hope told him she wanted to spend an evening with Lunar in the forest, to celebrate her birthday in a special way in advance. He didn't object. He was used to the unusual quirks of his wife and middle daughter. "Just don't stay out too late," he asked, "and keep your phone on." "Of course," Hope promised, kissing him. "Don't worry." She and Lunar left the house as the sun was setting. The sky was clear, cloudless, promising a bright night. The full moon, still pale in the evening light, rose above the forest. "Are you sure you know the way?" Hope asked as they entered the shade of the trees. Lunar nodded. "I go there often. It's a special place." She confidently led her mother along barely visible trails, sometimes stopping to listen or sniff. In such moments, she truly reminded Hope of a wolf cub, cautious, sensitive, full of primal grace. The clearing where Lunar was born had barely changed over the years. The same tall pines surrounded it, the same soft carpet of pine needles and moss. Only now, on a summer night, instead of snow, it was bathed in soft moonlight. "Here," Lunar said, stopping in the center. "Now we wait." They sat on a fallen log. Night slowly descended upon the forest, deepening the shadows between the trees. Stars appeared in the sky, bright and large. The full moon bathed the clearing in silvery light. The silence was broken only by the night sounds of the forest, the rustling of leaves, the hoot of an owl, the distant cry of some nocturnal creature. "She's coming," Lunar suddenly said, raising her head. "I can feel her." Hope tensed, peering into the darkness between the trees. And finally, she saw it. A silent shadow detached itself from the other shadows and emerged into the clearing. The she-wolf had aged significantly. Her silvery fur was now more gray, her muzzle covered in white. She moved slowly, cautiously, as if each step was a struggle, but her eyes, amber with golden flecks, remained the same, alive and intelligent. She approached closer, stopping a few steps from the woman and the girl. Lunar was the first to break the silence. "Hello," she simply said, as if addressing an old friend. The she-wolf lowered her head, looking at the girl. Then she shifted her gaze to Hope. In that moment, the woman felt something extraordinary, as if the veil between worlds had thinned, become transparent, as if she could look into the soul of the ancient creature before her and it into hers. "You saved me and my daughter," the wolf's gaze seemed to say, "and we saved you and your daughter. The circle is complete." "I know," Hope whispered, unconsciously responding to the unspoken thought. "Thank you." The she-wolf slowly approached. Lunar reached out and lightly touched her head, running her fingers over the old scars above her right eye. "She wants you to touch her, too," the girl said to her mother. Hope cautiously extended her hand. The she-wolf leaned her head into her palm. Her fur was coarse but warm. Hope felt the pulse beneath her hand, life as precious as her own. "She's leaving," Lunar said softly, "but a part of her will remain in the forest, and a part in me." The she-wolf took a step back, looking intently at both of them one last time, as if committing them to memory. Then she turned and slowly walked back towards the trees. At the edge of the clearing, she paused and looked back. In the moonlight, her silhouette appeared almost ethereal, as if she had already halfway crossed into another world, and then she vanished between the trees, dissolved into the night, as if she had never been there at all. "We won't see her again?" Hope asked, feeling a strange emptiness inside. Luna shook her head. "Not in this form, but she'll always be here." The girl gestured with her hand towards the forest around them. "In every tree, every blade of grass, in the snow in winter and the rains in spring. She became a part of the forest, and the forest a part of her." They sat in silence in the clearing, gazing at the stars. The night embraced them, but in this darkness there was no fear, only peace, acceptance, and a strange sense of completion. "You know," Hope finally said, "I think everything happens for a reason. Our move here, your birth in the forest, this she-wolf, it's as if someone above wrote this story long before us." "Maybe so," Lunar thoughtfully replied. "Or maybe we're writing the story with our actions, or the forest is writing it through us." They returned home by a different route, longer but familiar and safe. The moon illuminated their path, casting soft shadows on the forest floor. When the house was visible through the trees, a wolf's howl sounded somewhere far off, solitary, drawn out, full of inexpressible longing, and at the same time a strange triumph. Luna stopped, closed her eyes, and lifted her face to the sky. For a few seconds she just stood there, listening. Then she opened her eyes and smiled at her mother. "She said goodbye to us. Now her soul is free." Many more years passed. Holly became a teacher at the local school and married a boy from a neighboring settlement. Daisy moved away to study in a big city, but returned home every summer. Matthew grew into a strong, practical young man, a true pillar of support for his aging parents. And Luna? She stayed in the forest. She built a small cabin in the very clearing where she was born and became a herbalist. She would walk for miles, gathering rare plants, brewing concoctions and infusions that healed illnesses better than any pills from the city. Locals respectfully called her the Forest Seer and were a little wary. She was too strange, too unlike ordinary people. They whispered that she understood the language of animals and birds, that she could predict storms and find lost children. Hope would sometimes visit her, not as often as she would have liked. Her legs weren't what they used to be, and Ethan needed care. They would sit by the fire, drink herbal tea, and talk about life, about the forest, about what had been and what would be. And each time she left, Hope would notice tracks around her daughter's cabin, wolf tracks, many tracks, as if an entire pack regularly visited there. "Don't worry, Mom," Luna would say, noticing her gaze. "They won't harm me. They are my family, just like you, Dad, and the others." Meanwhile, big changes happened in the village. It grew, became more developed, and turned into a center for ecotourism. People came from all over the country to walk the forest trails, breathe the healing air, and listen to the silence. and every new resident or guest was told the local legend about a woman who gave birth in the winter forest with the help of a she-wolf, about a girl who grew up with a special connection to the forest, about how, if you got lost in the deep woods, you could call for help, and the wolves would lead you back to people. Most considered it just a beautiful fairy tale, but some, those who stayed longer, began to believe, especially on winter nights when the moon was full and the snow sparkled in its light. Gray shadows would appear at the edge of the village, silent guardians, protecting both the forest and the people within it. And in the center of the village, in a small square, stood an unusual monument, a woman with a child in her arms and a she-wolf beside them. The plaque bore a simple inscription, "To the guardians of these lands, past, present, and future." Hope, passing by, always smiled. She knew. The story continued. The circle was unbroken. The forest and its inhabitants, humans and wolves, life and death, all bound by unbreakable ties. And in this unity lay a strength greater than time itself. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, sitting on the porch of her old house, she would listen to the rustling of the trees and almost distinguish words in a strange, ancient language. And amidst that whisper, she would hear a familiar voice, the voice of the she-wolf, the guardian of the forest, who had given her and her daughter new life. "Thank you," that voice would say. "Thank you for remembering, for believing, for continuing the story." And the woman would smile and reply into the silence, "No, thank you for everything